Hello and welcome to Disaster Dispatch for August 30th, 2025 to September 5th, 2025. We are going to talk about disasters that happened over that week. And to start out with here, we are going to talk about wildfires. Specifically, we're going to start with U.S. wildfires. The overall situation for U.S. wildfires is interesting. First of all, we are back to preparedness level 4 after having dropped to 3 last week. This went back up because Northern California, Oregon, and Washington have been absolutely blasted by lightning strikes over the past week, receiving several thousand that have started a number of fires. One of these areas of approximately 16 different fires is being treated as a complex, which is basically a group of fires burning in an area operating under one command structure, and they have called it the TCU September Lightning Complex. It has currently burned about 14,000 acres or so and is approximately 20% contained. Now, the fires within that actual complex are each a different level of contained. Some of them are 100% contained, some of them are 0% contained, but it averages about 20% overall. Although one of those fires did manage to burn the majority of a historical mining town named Chinese Camp to the ground. That's the picture you see here on the left of Chinese Camp burning significantly. Now, the current status for the U.S. is not overall as dire as it could be or as it was in the previous several months. The starts in Northern California and Oregon and Washington have made things busy, which is why we're back at preparedness level 4. But the significant wildland fire potential outlook for September is looking better for the vast majority of the West. Aside from Northern California and Northern Nevada and way up there in Western Washington, as well as Hawaii, Maine, and New Hampshire and Vermont. Those areas that you see have the potential for have an above normal chance for a significant wildfire, which is basically a large wildfire over 100 or over 1,000 acres. Now, Hawaii is one of those that we haven't really heard about in the news this year for wildfires, but back in 2023 with the Lahaina wildfire, it was well in the news. And Hawaii's had several vegetation fires this year, but crews there have been very on it, very quick to get those out and contained. Northern California obviously is having a lot of lightning strikes and has had a lot of starts over the last week. And then we're going to have that northeastern wildland season that happens right around this year every year in Maine, New Hampshire, and Vermont. And of course, Santa Ana wind seasons is just around the corner, so Southern California will begin to pop off soon. That's down in this area down here in Southern California. Those winds are what led to the Palisades fire and the Eaton fire back in January. Yes, that was in January of this year. We have what happens is wind blows in from the desert over in here. It blows in here over the mountain ranges and causes significantly high winds up to 100 miles per hour, which, if anything, catches or ignites, if there's somebody shooting off fireworks, Palisades, or a car dragging chains or anything like that, anything that catches off gets caught in those heavy winds and can cause significant wildland fires in that area. On to our next tier, we have Canada's wildfires. Now, Canada's situation is getting even better. They've dropped to national preparedness level 3. They were at national preparedness level 5 for the vast majority of the summer, as things are starting to calm down after the craziness that was this summer. They currently have 634 active fires, which is a lot, but things are expected to slow down overall, which is good news for firefighters and good news for those who have seen a lot of smoke this year. Now, if you're looking at this map and wondering what all these dots are, the purple dots are fires that are out of control but are being monitored. The red circles are fires that are out of control that have active suppression activities on them. The yellow fires are fires that are being held. They're not expected to grow beyond what their current area is. And then blue fires are fires that are under control and are going to be extinguished. This map just a couple weeks ago was vastly majority of red and purple dots. Now we have a significantly lot more blue and yellow dots, which is a good news for Canada as they were really struggling this year. Moving on, we have Europe. Europe's wildfire situation is ever-changing, to be quite honest with you. The wildfire that was burning in North Yorkshire, England, is mostly contained and has thankfully stopped finding unexploded ordnance from World War II to blow up, because that was a thing that was happening a lot last week. The fire was burning under the peat, and the area that it was burning in was a tank training ground in World War II for English United Kingdom's military, and there was a bunch of unexploded ordnance that kept exploding as the fire burned, which is both terrifying and kind of cool depending on how you think about it. Anyway, there are some wildfires burning throughout Europe, but not nearly as many as previously. You can see some of the active fires below. Now, this is very hard to see, but if you see all these red dots in various areas, those are hot spots that show up on satellite. Now, not all of these are going to be actual wildfires. Over here in eastern Ukraine, you see right in here, those are not wildfires. That is actually artillery and drone strikes from the war in Ukraine, from Russia and Ukraine. If you look at the last 7-day map, this is just from yesterday. If you look at the last 7-day map, it is basically just a giant red line all throughout eastern Ukraine right here. It's wild to see. But one of the things to note is that not all of these red dots you see, which you can only kind of see, are going to be wildfires. Some of these are things that are continuously producing heat. There are several gas flares in this area that are always putting off heat. The majority of your fires is going to be up here in northern Spain. There have been several fires. There's a couple here in Portugal. There's always going to be some fires down in Sicily. There's a lot of fires that happen in Sicily, a lot of fires that happen down here in southern Europe, or southern Italy, I should say, and then usually Greece, Turkey, and all of that usually has several, all the way up into the Balkans up in here. But for the most part, the European situation is getting significantly better than what it was now that it has cooled off and they've had some rain and some relief, because there was a big wildfire down here in southern France just a couple weeks ago that caused a lot of problems. So Spain, Portugal, France, Italy, Greece are getting things under control, Turkey as well. Moving forward, your European outlook is more or less going to be what you would expect. The warmer areas are going to have a higher risk. The green, cooler areas are going to have lower risk, which is good, because just about a week ago, this whole map was basically orange because there was a massive heat wave sitting over Europe. So we're getting to a place where maybe Europe can have a moment to take a breather and get caught up, because a lot of these fire departments are not used to this kind of thing regularly. All right, moving on to the next, we have global hurricanes, specifically the Atlantic Ocean. We are currently looking at Invest 91L. It is getting all of the attention, and as of right now, it's going to have to fight a significant amount of dry air and dust as it continues to meander across the Atlantic. Currently, the NHC has it at a 20% chance of development after having it as high as a 90% chance of development at one point. Now, as of right now, some models have it developing, some have it sputtering out. It seems like the sputtering out ones are going to eventually win. Some of them have thrown it west towards the U.S. Some have it as a fish storm. Basically, we won't know much about what's going to happen with this particular invest until probably middle of next week. But the current issue is there is a ton of dry air and dust sitting right just north of the system that it's pulling in a lot of, and it's continuing to travel this direction, but it's unlikely that it's actually going to develop into much of anything. Now, it still potentially could once it gets over into this area, depending on if it continues this direction or if it curves. It could develop into something over here, but we will have to wait and see. Nothing's really in agreement on what exactly happens with it currently. Now we move to the Eastern/Central Pacific. The Eastern Pacific is an entirely different story as of right now. We have a full-on developed hurricane, Hurricane Kiko, currently sitting at a Category 3 major hurricane with sustained winds of about 115 miles per hour with a central pressure of 962 millibars. It is spinning across the Pacific Ocean, headed in the general direction of Hawaii. Now, what's interesting about Kiko is it is relatively small in size, but has a very large eye compared to the rest of the storm. The actual storm itself is probably about 120-ish miles across, and I would estimate the diameter of the eye is at least a third, probably maybe a quarter of that. It's a huge eye compared to the actual storm, which doesn't really mean much, but it's very interesting. Now, the current track has Kiko going north of Hawaii by early Tuesday morning, but will likely bring some rainfall and winds to the actual Hawaiian Islands. So if you look here on our handy-dandy cone of uncertainty, here's where your storm currently sits. It is going to be somewhere in these two lines. And what I mean by it is I mean the actual eye will be somewhere in this general vicinity for the next 5 days. Now, it's called the cone of uncertainty because we don't know exactly where the eye will be in this cone, but it will be somewhere in this cone. A lot of people believe that the cone means that's where the entire storm will be, and that is not accurate. It is simply just where the eye of the storm is going. Now, as of right now, it appears that the actual eye itself will end up going north of Hawaii, but it may end up impacting some of the islands with its southern portion of the storm. But it won't be as bad because with the way this storm is moving, your worst area is going to be up here in this quadrant right here as this storm moves this direction. This is going to be your worst area. So the fact that it's going to move to the north of Hawaii indicates that Hawaii will get this southern half of the storm, which will not cause nearly as much problems. It may still cause some problems, but not nearly as bad. Moving on to the western Pacific Ocean, we have Tropical Storm Peipa. Tropical Storm Peipa moved from tropical depression to tropical storm on September 4th, just a few hours before it made its first landfall near Tsukumo, Japan. It made its second landfall in Japan a few hours later, and Peipa caused at least one tornado and significant winds that injured several people, caused widespread power outages and some significant flooding. It quickly became extratropical and traveled northeast away from Japan. It's not expected to cause any other problems. The only other major area of concern in the Western Pacific is Invest 97W. It is currently expected to form into a major tropical system this week and track northwestward toward mainland China. Now, our global tropical outlook for the next 2 weeks from September 10th to September 16th and September 17th to September 23rd is relatively low with only 2 hotspots above 20%. The upcoming week of September 10th to September 16th in the eastern Pacific Ocean off the coast of Mexico, we have a 20% chance of development in this area just west of Mexico, which would push most of its storms either this direction or straight out this direction, kind of like Hurricane Kiko this week. And then our next one in the next week from September 17th to September 23rd is over here in the main development region in the Atlantic Ocean, just off the coast of Africa, north of South America. These are the storms that come out here, kind of like the current Invest that's sitting out in the Atlantic Ocean right now. Those are our major areas of concern at the moment. Now, again, there could be some development in these others. There's 20% chance, but we will keep an eye on the tropics because it is still peak hurricane season, especially in the Atlantic. Now, moving on to our next section, we have fires and explosions. This one is a weird one. On August 29th, a large explosion occurred in the early morning hours in Bend, Oregon. A large shipping container suddenly exploded without warning, sending debris and shrapnel flying around, damaging multiple buildings, but luckily injuring no one. Investigators determined the shipping container was being used as a welding location, and the oxygen acetylene tank inside leaked, which filled the shipping container. For some reason, a freezer was also inside the container plugged into an extension cord. The freezer kicked on, which caused arcing on the extension cord, which then ignited the available gas in the atmosphere and exploded the shipping container. This is weird, is the only word I have for it. There is a series of choices that were made here that I don't fully understand. Why are you welding inside a shipping container? Why do you have a freezer run by an extension cord in a shipping container? Why do you have a freezer run by an extension cord in the first place? all of these things are questions that I have no answers to, but I would love to know them. You can see on the actual image here, you can see where the explosion, you can see how it's dented here in the middle. It's pushing right here. That's part of the shipping container. You can see that's where they hook things onto. But you can see how it's been blown out. The shipping container is over in this direction and blew a bunch of debris out, caused some damage over here. You can see where it hit the wall here, caused some significant damage. I don't know. I don't understand why you had a shipping container or a welding station inside a shipping container. That seems like a bad idea. But nevertheless, when you do things like that, you essentially turn shipping containers into a giant bomb. So don't do that. Anyway, moving on. We had a massive 5-alarm fire in Baltimore that prompted an extensive response from firefighting officials on September 2nd. The fire impacted 3 buildings, including 2, causing 1 to collapse. The fire started in a vacant building and spread to 2 other vacant buildings, causing firefighters to mostly fight the fire from the exterior. It is not known exactly what started the fire, but it is currently under investigation. As the buildings are all vacant, it was likely started from some sort of open flame, as they would not have had active electricity in the buildings, especially because reports indicated that most of these buildings have been vacant since at least 2010. So it's unlikely that any of them still had electricity hooked up. You can see they're using their deluge gun here on top of the tower here, just indicating that they're primarily doing an exterior attack. On the next one, we had a warehouse fire in Yonkers, New York. On Wednesday, September 3rd, a fire broke out inside a warehouse owned by European Beauty Concept there in Yonkers, New York. One of the workers inside was using a forklift to move a pallet of beauty products. Either the forklift or some of the material being moved hit a container, which released one of the products inside. This began to leak for approximately 1 hour with a very visible white cloud before one of the spilled materials vapor found an ignition source. If I were to make an educated guess, I would assume our vapor ignited was acetone. Sometimes when you have so much of something in the air, you can kind of see it a little bit. Usually acetone vapor is invisible, but it's really the only thing that makes much sense as to why there would be a significant amount of it, why it would ignite so quickly after having been leaked for an hour. Something probably kicked on inside the warehouse, which caused this ignition. Authorities have been a little odd about this one, but that seems to be the most likely scenario here. Moving on to our next section is crashes. Now, this first one doesn't have a photo, but at least 60 people were killed on Wednesday, September 3rd, when the ship they were on hit a submerged tree stump along the route it was traveling in northern Nigeria. The ship quickly sank with nearly 100 people on board, and recovery efforts are still underway to find those still missing. Now, on Wednesday, September 3rd, it was a really bad day on Wednesday, September 3rd this year. The Gloria funicular vehicle in Lisbon, Portugal, reached the top of the hill for its trip upwards when it suddenly careened downhill with approximately 40 people on board before derailing and smashing into a building partway down the hill. 16 people have been confirmed to have been killed in the crash. It had been revised up to 17, but then was revised back down to 16 as they realized that someone was counted twice. The investigation is still ongoing, but it is believed that the cable that helps pull the funicular up the hill snapped, causing the car at the top of the hill to hurtle down with no way to stop it. Now, I can hear you saying, what is a funicular and how does it work? So we are going to look at our funicular here. So how this funicular works is you look here on this map. This is the Gloria funicular in Lisbon. This is one of the vehicles. Now, what happens here is that as this car right here goes uphill, there is a car that is attached to a cable that runs along this, well, that was a poor drawing, but along one of these on the ground. So you can see the rails, then in the middle is a cable. This cable runs all the way up to the top of the hill with a pulley at the top that then goes around to the other funicular. Now, if we go uphill a little ways here, so you can see there's tracks on the ground. If we go uphill, actually, let's go back downhill real quick. Sorry. Whoops, too far. So this area right here, This area right here is where the actual crash happened. This is the curve. It came around the corner and collided into the building right here. That's where the actual disaster occurred. But if we go uphill a little ways here, you can see the other one there in the distance. Right here, you can see they split into two. So you have a track on this side and a track on this side so that they can pass each other as they're going downhill. And you can't really see it very well, but inside this right here is where the cable sits. On either side here, if we go to the other side, it sits, it sits right there in that little section. And it goes all the way up to the very top of the hill. Zoom out here. It goes all the way to the very top of the hill, goes around a pulley, and then attaches to the front of the other one. And each cable car, each tram, weighs the same amount. So when one is going up, the force of the other one is going backwards. They're basically pulling each other back and forth up the hill. Now, obviously, there is some difference in weight when they add passengers. So there is some additional power provided by an electrical motor that pulls power from these up here at the top. Right here, that pulls some power to add them some extra power. But that's basically how it works. And at some point, one of the cable in the ground here likely snapped, sending one of these careening down the hill, down here, and then derailed at this curve right in this general over here. At least 15 people were killed in a bus crash in Sri Lanka on September 5th. 30 people were aboard a tourist bus from the town of Tangal when they collided with an oncoming Jeep before careening over a 1,000-foot tall cliff. The 15 injured were taken to local hospitals, with several currently in critical condition. In Colorado this week, one person was killed and 3 people were injured after 2 planes collided midair near the Fort Morgan Municipal Airport on August 31st. Both planes appear to have been attempting to land at the same time when they clipped wings and plunged to the ground. Both planes caught on fire on the ground, and the occupants of one plane had minor injuries, while one person from the other plane died and the other was injured and taken to the hospital. On to our next section, we have earthquakes. There was one major earthquake this week, late in the evening of August 31st. A magnitude 6.0 earthquake struck eastern Afghanistan in the Kunar province. This earthquake caused significant destruction, with nearly 1 million people living in the area that was subjected to very strong to violent shaking. The death toll has reached 2,205 people and could continue to rise in the coming days as more searches are performed in areas hardest hit. Many of the structures in the area are not built to withstand earthquakes, and the type of soil in this area of Afghanistan is mostly soft sediment, which can increase the ground shaking. In addition, the earthquake was not very deep, causing even more intense shaking on the surface. Several villages were feared to be completely destroyed, and estimating that upwards of 90% of the population of some villages were killed. And there were a number of landslides. This is a very, very mountainous area, have completely cut off several villages from access from rescue workers, so it is very likely that things will continue to grow and be very fluid in the coming days. In addition, there have been a number of aftershocks causing even more damage in the area, so this is an ongoing situation. All right, and our next section is other disasters that don't really fit in any of the previous categories. This one was a disaster in South Korea. One man was killed on September 3rd, again, a really bad day last week, in South Korea when a stress test being performed on a floating production, storage, and offloading unit failed catastrophically. Basically, it is a system that goes to underwater drilling rigs and collects all of the oil and natural gas and then takes it back to shore, so you don't have to put those expensive things like Deepwater Horizon that cost a lot of money and you have to manually keep in place. Essentially, they've made these so they can move. They're not nearly as important sitting in place to take the gas and oil back to land to be used. Basically, the man was observing the test when the structure collapsed and he fell in the ocean. You can see where it collapsed here on the back here. The test being performed at the time was a hose reel load test, which was supposed to reach 312 tons, but failed when it reached 280 tons and dropped the structure into the ocean and the man with it. Basically, they have a hose reel sitting on the back. You can see the hose reel right here. You can see as it's being, this is the area it's being tested, so you can see the cables and all that running down. Essentially, they were pulling on it to try and make sure that it was going to stay in place when they had to go down into the water to collect all of the oil in that and provide a significant amount of weight to the back of this to make sure it, didn't do, well, this. That's what the test was to make sure that they could keep this hose reel in place. The hose reel would be able to withstand the weight of the test, and also the actual superstructure would be able to withstand the weight of the test. And clearly it failed both of those. You can see the bending of steel members right here. You can see them bent here. You can see them bent here. You can see it a little bit bent over here. And when it collapsed down, he fell into the ocean and was initially declared missing before being found by rescuers sometime later floating in the water and having died since. And with that, we've reached the end of this week's Disaster Dispatch. As always, you guys can like, subscribe, comment, let me know what you think. If you want to send me disasters that happened during the week in your area, you absolutely can. My email is disastroushistory@gmail.com. You can also send it on, well, pretty much any social media. I'll probably eventually see it. So, as always, remember to stay safe and check your smoke detector batteries.